Hi everyone, this is Daniel here. I just wanted to go over this new Monochord build and sort of just tell you a little bit about it. So this Monochord is sort of the Monochord on a budget. This took me on and off over the course of about a week. Cost roughly $45 to make and is really about being frugal with money. So my goal here was to make a monochord as cheaply as possible that sounded reasonably well, would be affordable for anybody to build, and I also wanted to incorporate a slightly different design than the other monochords I've built, and I wanted it to be a curved one. So this is sort of the culmination of all of that. So this monochord is made of 1/4-inch birch plywood, which I had laying around. It was left over from another project. Now, a sheet of this plywood, 4x8, at my local building center costs about $40. This, in total, used less than half of a sheet of that plywood. The ends are scrap, I think this is scrap 5/8 inch plywood, which I actually just found in a wood pile around back of the house. Bridges are made of aluminum stock, round aluminum stock, and the wires actually just wire that you can find at any hardware store. It's straight off the shelf. This is not specialty wire for strings. They're not nearly as durable. They will not last as long. They do have a tendency to stretch over time, so these strings will go out of tune quite often until they snap. So investing in decent strings is something I'm going to do for this one in the future. Even though I tried to make it as cheap as possible, strings is something you really shouldn't skimp on. Other than that, the construction is very basic. Construction is basically, it's a wooden box, except that the ends are curved. So when building this, I had to curve the top piece over the sides here to give it the shape, and it's the same on the bottom except it's inverse. So I had to essentially push the bottom resonator panel into the curve of the pin blocks. The holes on these ones, on this particular instrument, is very widely spaced. They're a lot smaller than I have in the past. I wanted to see if the different size in the holes would affect the quality, and as far as I can tell, it sounds just about as good as any other monochord I've built. The only things on here that were purchased specifically for this that are musical instrument parts is actually the zither pins, which are the tuning pegs on the end. Everything else on here is repurposed, bought at your local hardware store. Should be super, super easy to source all the materials for this. And even the zither pins, you can find them on eBay, super, super cheap. So, that's basically this instrument in a nutshell. The quality of the workmanship is terrible. I cut a lot of corners, I did a lot of things wrong. I just wanted to slap this thing together and see if I could do something that took very little time, very little money, and very little effort, and produce something that sounds reasonably well for a musical instrument. Yeah. The instrument does have it has a nice tone. Its tone would be much different if the strings were higher quality. If I was using piano wire instead of this, the sound would be a little bit nicer. If I was using something like cello strings, it would be much nicer still. Unfortunately, this instrument would cost well over $1,000 if I wanted to replace all of this with quality strings. So for the time being, it's just being made, or it'll just be played with these hardware run-of-the-mill wire. I'm going to upload a second video of this instrument being played at length without me talking in it, just so that if you did want to use that in the future for meditating, for just listening to, for having something in the background, you won't have to listen to me drone on and then have the music come afterwards or before it.
I'd just like to add on quickly here that the extended recording of this monochord being played, which is 20 minutes long, is also available on Bandcamp, and any of the money that comes from that is going to be going directly back into this channel. I'm hoping to build a few more instruments, and I'd really like to see how far I can push building monochords, building these instruments, and maybe try and do something that nobody's seen before. Maybe make one that's crazy big, make one that's a completely different style, something off the wall. And in closing, just want to say thank you very much for watching this, and enjoy the other video.